Who is the best UFC fighter to never win a belt? A very hot discussed topic that I will give my personal answer to in this video. Hello and welcome to Bloodsport MMA.
Salam alaikum. Walaikum salam.
This is something similar like the GOAT discussion, where you can always bring in arguments from a different perspective and argue about it, right? This is definitely a discussable topic that would be fun as well. I would love to do a podcast with someone and just talk about it for an hour or something, because you can bring in so many points from different points of views as well. And I encourage you, please write in the comments who you think that it is and discuss with me on things that I say in this video, right? And challenge me. I like that.
And I liked it.
And I will just give you my point of view, my answer. So you have a lot of guys that never won a belt that are world class. And just to make that clear from the beginning, Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, those guys, they won a belt. They won an interim belt. Of course, you could say who never won an undisputed belt, but still, they won a belt. So that changes a lot of things for me. It's a big difference if you won an interim belt or if you never won a belt. Even though you challenged for it, you never won a belt. That's also why I take people like, of course, a lot of people will come with Nate Diaz as well. Nick Diaz, sorry, not Nate. I love Nate, but he's not one of the best guys to never win a belt. And yeah, Nate Diaz was phenomenal. And by the way, I will just talk about the more or less modern era. I will not talk about the Randy Couture era too much, even though Nick is kind of from the old era. But anyways, like Nick Diaz is also an example that, yeah, he was phenomenal. He was a good fighter. A weird fighter though. I don't think he would have that much success nowadays with his style. And he at least was a Strikeforce champion. He at least held the belt in the former UFC in a way, because Strikeforce then got bought by the UFC, and a lot of Strikeforce guys then became UFC champions, like Hook Huckhold, like Daniel Cormier, all those guys. You know what I mean? Like, if you were a Strikeforce champion, that's at least something. It's like an interim belt to me in a way, you know what I mean? Because Strikeforce at one point of time was the shit. What other names come to mind? Yoel Romero, for example. Yoel Romero comes to mind. I mean, he fought for the title several times. He even beat Luke Rockhold. Was it the interim belt that he beat him for? He beat him for the interim belt, I believe, for the real belt, but he missed weight, so he couldn't win the belt. That was a pity. Like, he nearly was the champion. The only reason why he wasn't the champion is because he missed weight, which is sad, but it is the case. Yoel Romero is definitely up there. I would probably even put him in my top 3, because people forget what a beast Romero was. I mean, the knockouts he had were crazy. But the problem for Romero is just, he was so inconsistent. Like, mostly when he fought for titles, even in Bellator now when he fought for the title, he just froze. He just didn't do anything. I never understand it. When he fought Izzy, if I'm Romero against Izzy, I'm going balls to the wall against Izzy. That's the way how you can beat Izzy if you're Romero. You only need to touch him once to get him out of there. And he just stood there frozen like Elsa. Even when he fought, did he fight Nimkov or whatever in Bellator for the title? He just stood there the whole time doing this. Show the man, dirty boxing, dirty boxing.
Dirty boxing.
Like, it's just really sad. I don't really get what his mindset was going into these title fights, but he's definitely up there in the list of one of the best fighters to never win a belt. Of course, Kenny Florian comes to mind. Chad Mendes comes to mind, but didn't Chad win the interim belt? No, he didn't. He lost to Conor for the interim belt, right? Like, a lot of guys come to mind that never really, that challenged for the belt, but never quite got there. You can make an argument for so many guys that I don't even want to start listing up too many names, because it just never ends, right? There's so many phenomenal guys. But there's one guy to me that really stands out.
I got one dude on my mind!
That for me is just the best UFC fighter ever, especially in the more or less modern era, to never touch gold. He fought for gold on 2 occasions, if I remember right, but he never won gold. Who is it?
Who?
His name is Alexander Gustafsson. Alexander, I mean, the pandemic kids, the pandemic UFC fans, which most of the UFC fans are somehow, that started watching the pandemic, they will never realize how good Alexander Gustafsson was. we're not talking about the Alexander Gustafsson that got knocked out back-to-back in his last couple of fights that you saw. We talk about the Alexander Gustafsson that gave Daniel Cormier, DC, one of the greatest of all times, the fight of his life. Watch that fight back. He gave DC everything and more. DC said himself that this was the fight where the only fight where he really left a piece of him inside that octagon, like a big piece. He said that night, a big piece of Daniel Cormier, like when the Daniel Cormier that went into that octagon at the beginning of the fight was not the Daniel Cormier that got out of that fight and ever since. A piece of Daniel Cormier was lost that night in the cage because Gustafsson was so freaking good. He could wrestle, he could strike, he could submit you. He was just a full package. If Daniel Cormier and Jon Jones do not exist, Alexander Gustafsson is a long reigning champion in the UFC's light heavyweight division, in my opinion. He was the best next to them. And of course, that also took a toll on him. As I said, also Jon Jones is a main name that I mentioned. He also gave Jon Jones the fight of his life. Of course, Reyes also did that, but like he fought prime Jon Jones, you could say, and he gave him the fight of his life in the first fight. He gave Jon Jones everything. That fight is a Hall of Fame fight as well, by the way. Watch it if you've never watched it. I really suggest to watch that fight. That was phenomenal, a great fight. And Gustafsson gave it to Jon Jones everywhere, in every realm of the fight. Gustafsson was so freaking good and tough, yet that Viking mentality, you could not get him out of there somehow, and he just, yeah, he was just so freaking good everywhere. He was just a complete package. But Jon Jones, it's just Jon Jones, and he had to fight Jon Jones and DC for the belt, and those two guys were not beatable at light heavyweight by anybody else than Jon Jones. Jon Jones defeated himself, and he defeated Daniel Cormier. Jon Jones is the only guy that could defeat Daniel Cormier at light heavyweight. I stay with that. Even in nowadays, I think nowadays Daniel Cormier beats the crap out of Alex Pereira. He just takes him down and does whatever he wants to him. I think Daniel Cormier beats the crap out of everyone at light heavyweight from the beginning to now. So Gustafsson to give him such a fight was crazy, and against Jon Jones, and of course in the rematch then Jon Jones in the rematch was just a different beast. You saw with Daniel Cormier, first fight was decisions, rematch he beat the crap, like he finished him. I'd say like that. Same with Gustafsson, he beat the crap out of him in the second fight, but still. You also can't forget that, of course, after that Gustafsson maybe wasn't as successful as maybe other fighters who are up there in that list. But that, in my opinion, is also because he left a piece of Jon Jones in the octagon, of course, and of Daniel Cormier, but he also left a big piece of himself in the octagon in those two fights. Those two fights took so much out of him as well that he was never really the same again. He was never really the same again after those two Jon Jones fights and after the Daniel Cormier fight. He was still elite, but he wasn't the same again. And I do firmly believe, for my opinion at least, that Alexander Gustafsson is the best fighter in UFC history to never win any gold strap. He never won any belt at Strikeforce or anything like that. And if Jon Jones and DC don't exist, Gustafsson is the greatest light heavyweight of all time, probably by this time. That's my opinion on this whole thing. Of course, there's a lot of guys, as I said, with interim belts like Colby Covington, all those guys were up there on that list, but they won interim belts, so that excludes them from that list for me at least. But your list, write in the comments, you guys, who do you think is the greatest of all time to never win a UFC belt? Do you include the interim champs? Whoever it is for you, write in the comments, maybe say why it is him. I would love to hear your takes, and I'm open for discussions. I'm also with all those discussions, I'm always open to change my mind, even though I think my mind is pretty made up about this case. But anyways, write in the comments, be sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, would appreciate that. It's one click, guys. Click on subscribe. You can also be a member, have a lot of cool benefits with it. Check it out, you guys. Check out the Bloodsport merch as well, bloodshop.net, my official merch store. You will support me greatly. You will wear a phenomenal merch with good quality. Check it out. We're about free shipping with the code FREE. The link is in the bio. Stay bloody, you guys. Until the next one. Bye-bye. Bloodsport out.